Hi everyone, welcome back to Jungle Citizens. Today I'm going to be doing some planting in this little garden here in San Jose. So it's been a little while. I was hoping to get it done a lot earlier than I am, but today and tomorrow is going to be the planting day, and then it'll be off to the next spot. So the first thing I'm going to do is show you a couple of the plants that I bought in that nursery. That was probably the episode from last week, I guess. And then we're going to get on and do some planting, and I'll give you a couple of little tips and tricks and some of the problems that I faced along the way, which hopefully will be helpful for your gardens as well. Alright, let's get into it and see what plants I bought. Right, so here we have my little collection of plants that I'm going to be adding to this place. Just going to talk you through them very quickly. Here, this one, I'm sure many of you can recognize it. This is a passion fruit, also known as maracuya, passiflora, I can't remember exactly which one. But it's exactly the same one that we grew in India. It grows extremely fast, extremely quickly. It has the most beautiful flowers and it has a very tasty fruit as well. So it ticks lots of the boxes. It gives nectar to butterflies and night-flying moths and hummingbirds, which we have here. It gives a fruit, it gives a beautiful flower that's really wonderfully scented. And because it's fast-growing, it's going to allow me to very quickly cover this one roadside metal fence thing, which will be very good to have covered for this hostel because it gives a little bit more privacy from the outside. So, always a favourite plant of mine to grow. And it's also a host plant, I should add, for a few caterpillar species, which is always helpful. Next one is another passiflora. This one is the granadilla. I don't really know if it has a name in English or not, but it gives a yellow fruit. And it's utterly delicious. It's a little bit less tart than the normal passion fruit. It's a gentle taste, but it's very sweet and it's delectable. I can eat so many of them. I think it's probably my favorite passiflora fruit that I've yet tried. But now that I'm in Latin America, hopefully I'll get to try lots and lots more. So this one is going to be planted in the same way. It's going to be put along that kind of metal gate fence thing along the road. Okay. Now, next up, we've got this dude, and also this dude. So these are two stachytarfetas, or porterweeds. They're probably, maybe just different colour forms of the same species, or maybe different species, I don't exactly know. But these guys are native here to South America. You'll find them in many other places because they're a very beautiful plant. So very much like the lantanas, they've been spread all over the world for ornamental planting. But here in this part of the world, they are native. And not only are they native, but they are, again, really, really important host plants and nectar plants for butterflies. And nectar plants also for hummingbirds. So it's another really, really fantastic one to get into these kinds of urban gardens because, of course, we really want to do whatever we can to maximize the biodiversity within these urban spaces. And getting in plants like this does exactly that. Here in San Jose, we're very, very close to rainforests and cloud forests, as you've probably noticed, because the last two episodes that I did were going into the cloud forest just by taking a simple Uber from here. Within 20-25 minutes, you can be in really, really wild places. So the potential for urban biodiversity here in this city is absolutely immense. So you only have to do a couple of little things to your gardens to really bring back some of these incredible species, especially for a hostel like this. It's amazing to have these kinds of plants because you're attracting the butterflies and the moths and the hummingbirds, and exactly that is what many of the guests that are coming here are wanting to see. Many of them, it's the first time that they're arriving in Costa Rica, sometimes the first time they've ever been in a tropical land, and they spend their first night or two here. So it's a fantastic opportunity to introduce people to these mad, amazing butterfly and moth and bird and insect. So that's why we're doing it. That's why we're getting these plants in. hopefully it will have a really good impact for the hostel. Right, next. Very interesting plant, this one, guys. Considering the Indian background I have here, we have Lantana Camara. We've got a yellow one, and we've got a kind of pinky one here. Now, Lantana was actually one of my real enemies in India. It was a huge problem. So much so that in one of our previous videos, a couple of years ago, we searched for 5 of the most dangerous houseplants, and this was one of them. In India, it is causing untold amounts of damage to national parks and wildlife sanctuaries and ecosystems in general, because it's not native and nothing controls it. Of course, it got there through the ornamental garden trade. It has beautiful flowers, very scented leaves, very easy to grow, very robust, attracts lots of butterflies, so it's a really easy one to plant in the garden. The problem is it's also extremely effective at spreading. It has little berries, and those berries are eaten by birds, and they're then spread all over the place, and it's a very strong plant. It's very fast growing, and it's very capable of outcompeting native species. So if you are not in Latin America or the Caribbean, this is not a plant to plant, because it's going to potentially cause huge problems in your ecosystem if it spreads out. And in the long run, the harm is far, far, far worse than whatever good it might do by giving a little bit of nectar to certain species of butterflies. Here in Latin America, however, it's an amazing plant because it's native. And because it's native, there's lots of things that are able to keep it in check. So for an urban garden in this kind of an area, it's an absolutely fantastic plant to plant because of the same reasons that it's a fantastic plant for gardeners elsewhere. It's robust and resilient. It's relatively resistant to droughts and a lack of water. It can deal with high temperatures. It can also deal with relatively lower temperatures, not frost or anything like that, but certainly down to 6, 7, 8 degrees. It's not bothered in the slightest. It has that very, very nice, beautiful smell on the leaves, and yeah, the flowers are very attractive. Not only that, it's a host plant again for many caterpillars, and it's a nectar plant for many butterflies and moths and the hummingbirds again. So really, really good plant to have if you are in Central South America and the Caribbean and you're within its native range. If you're not within its native range, I urge you, find another plant, because there's so many incredible plants wherever in the world you are that are going to have a similar kind of role but aren't going to have the risks associated with the potential invasiveness of this plant. Right, so that's the lantana. Now the last ones that I'm going to show you are a whole mix of heliconias, and honestly I couldn't tell you what they are because none of them are flowering. So one of the things I always do in nurseries wherever I am is I always look at the very back. Wherever people can't really see so much is sometimes where the most interesting plants are. And when I went to the nursery, I asked for heliconias, and they took me to strelitzias, which are the South African birds of paradise. Very beautiful plant, but of course not native to here. And if I can, I always like to work with as many native or near-native plants as possible. So I had a little poke around the nursery, and at the very, very back of one of their growing houses, I found a little assortment of heliconias. And like I said, none of them have flowers, so I have no idea what they are, which does make it a little bit more complicated to plant because I'm kind of guessing what they're going to need. Many heliconias like a kind of dappled shade environment, not too much sun, but not full shade either. I don't really have much of that here because it's mostly full sun. So yeah, it's a little bit of a gamble, but I'm going to do my very best to try and get them as happy as possible. And I've got a couple of other plants here that are old plants that have been in pots for absolutely ages that I can use to give a little bit of structure and definition to the garden. So I'm going to be putting those in, and hopefully that's going to provide enough of the shade that these guys need to be able to thrive. And of course, being heliconias, they have the most beautiful flowers. I don't know which ones they are, so I don't know what flowers are going to come out, but so many different varieties. There's hanging heliconias, there's upright heliconias, yellows, oranges, greens, whites, so many different colours. And again, being native, they support lots of species here. So there's native species of caterpillars and moth and butterfly caterpillars that eat the leaves. And the nectar is a fantastic food source again for the hummingbirds. And the hummingbirds really are one of the most enigmatic species of Latin America, and something that tourists always like to see. So if we can get more plants in that are attracting the hummingbirds, that's going to be fantastic for the guests. This is what these guys look like. I can just tell you that they all look a little bit different. I've got 5 actually. There's another one back there that I forgot to put here. But yeah, this is basically what I've got to work with. I did get some plants, which includes this little dude. I think it's just a crystallinum magnificum hybrid kind of thing, but it's obviously been living in some very high light, so at the moment it's looking quite washed out. But yeah, very happy to see something like that again. And I got a Monstera siltepecana, or at least I think it's a siltepecana, which is also going to be a very cool thing to get planted up. And I got a Philodendron melanochrysum, which is pretty cool as well, and will add a lot to this landscape. And I got a Philodendron Bell Marx variegata, which has a couple of good variegated patches coming and a couple of less good ones, but that's always a great one to put in and around the garden. And also from a restaurant guest point of view, they're really good at keeping just in water. You can just have them in a little glass of water and they're very happy for months on end, so it's a great one to put into restaurants or have on tables. And then I got this dude, which is some kind of a variegated alocasia type thing. So and I got a couple of orchids. I totally forgot. This is some sort of a very cool native orchid. I don't really know exactly what it is. And I got one more as well in this little bag. And this, I don't know what that is either, but I'm going to try and find out. And then, as always, we'll add it into the bottom. So that's alongside all my other cuttings. You can see here, this is my little cutting collection that I'm slowly getting going. So we've got some kind of peperomia-y type things here. And then we've got a whole bunch of the local Monstera adansonii. This is the San Jose Monstera adansonii, which grows like crazy everywhere around. And a few other kind of bits and bobs and odds and sods. Of course, it would have been nice to be able to get loads more plants, but I was on a very tight budget, which means that I don't have that many options to play with. But yeah, these are the plants that I've got, and this is the space that I've got. So now I'm going to start getting down and dirty. So one of the first things that I've done, which I have to continue doing for the moment, is removing all of the stones. So one of these very lazy landscaping effects that is often utilized by professional landscapers for reasons that mostly I don't understand, is that they put these colored rocks down to cover the soil. It's very quick, it's very easy. It's something that you can easily charge clients a whole load for, and it looks really good for a few weeks. But then it starts causing problems because rocks soak up the sun, they soak up heat and temperature, which means that you're warming up the plants on the ground. And the ground is where they have their roots. Roots don't want to be warm, they want to be cool, they want to be moist. Actually, they want to be wet a lot of the time, especially if you're in a place like Costa Rica, which is actually a rainforest. So it's a really nonsensical approach to landscaping in many places. It can work for a path, but you really don't want it around your plants because rocks don't give anything. They are not providing any nutrients, they are not providing any positive effects. Generally, they're only providing negative effects. What you want around your plants is you want organic material, because organic material, of course, is going to be providing the nutrients and the vitamins and the soil biodiversity that is required for a plant to thrive. So the first thing that we have to do, which is incredibly monotonous and dull, but is important if you're going to do a job properly to do it, is removing all of these stones, or at least a whole load of them, which can then allow us to reinvigorate the soil and reinvigorate the soil biodiversity, and therefore create a lush and beautiful garden. If we don't do that, then we're basically not going to do a good job. And in the end, that doesn't make any sense. Even in a place like this, where I'm only here for a couple of weeks and I'm moving on. It's always important to do the best job that can be done, and hopefully to create a system that is going to be really easy to care for, and that will continue thriving for many, many, many years. In fact, indefinitely, if they look after it properly. So we've removed an awful lot of the rocks. So now we have a little bit of a better soil, which you guys are going to be able to see. And we've cut down these dead areca palm type plants because they were completely dead. So I'm now slowly turning them into wood chippings that I can then use for the substrate. It's a little bit painstaking because I only have a machete to do it with, but we're getting there slowly. So a lot of people buy orchid bark or cocoa husk or things like that from garden shops or garden centres, but actually you can make your own. So you only really need a big dead palm like this. This is an areca palm, not the areca nut that we used to grow in India, that gets grown all around South and Southeast Asia. This is the same family, Arecaceae, I think it is. Comes from Africa. They look like this when they're babies. That's a baby one. And they get to be 15, 20 meters high, something like that. But these guys have all died back, I think because these rocks were put in, and the rocks have just ended up really creating a very unfriendly environment for plants. So because they've died back, we've now cut them down, and I'm now basically chipping them. So I'm using this very Central American style machete, which I've had to sharpen to make it a little bit more usable. And I'm basically just making small little chips out of this material. And you can see, because it's dead, it's already able to, you can kind of break it down yourself, and it's already a little bit spongy. But once you've cut it up into these small pieces like this, or into these pieces, because some of them are quite big, the next step will be to soak them. So you get yourself a barrel, or you get yourself a bucket, fill it with water, and then you leave all of this in there for a period of a week, maybe 5 days, something like that. And what that will do is it will allow all of this to soak up the water. And in soaking up the water, it will start to also make this a lot softer and basically break down all of the little fibers and the things that hold it together, and make it far more able to hold a lot of water. And of course, that's a really great thing for plants if the substrate is able to soak in and hold a lot of water, because it reduces the watering requirements. It means that there's always more access for the plants. So this is what I'm going to be doing now, because I don't have anywhere to go and buy orchid bark, and also because I have no budget to buy orchid bark or coconut husk or anything else. I'm just going to make it myself, because that way I know that the plants that I'm going to be planting are going to have a really, really lovely environment, and there's going to be the best chance for them to thrive in the long run, and to be thriving without having to be maintaining them an awful lot, which of course is a really important thing, especially if you're making plants for clients where you're not going to be able to keep looking after them. So yeah, it's worth doing.
I hope you enjoyed the first part of this two-part series where we showed you a little bit of the background of the garden and the plants we bought, which is going to show the actual planting process and then the first stage of the end product. We also have a very interesting video on the way where we visited one of the most incredible botanical gardens in Costa Rica, so make sure you keep an eye on that as well, because we'll be uploading that very, very soon. Have a wonderful day. It was great to see you here, and see you very soon.